Facebook can do just about anything that it wants, and it won't negatively impact them. Even though they have actually taken on a good amount of censorship, it has not hurt their business. Unlike Twitter, the monopoly takes action that the community and the users may not like. But the monopoly is so strong and so sticky and so ingrained that it doesn't make a financial impact.
What about Facebook? What about the tech monopolies, the content platform tech monopolies here, which, they also, I think, in my opinion, have been too restrictive in the actions that they've taken against some of their producer community, Facebook included. But was Facebook hurt at all? Now, Facebook, by the way, relatively amongst the pack of them being Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter. You could throw in a Pinterest and some others, but I think Snapchat, of the main kind of dominant content social networking platforms, Facebook, I actually think, has been the most open relatively. I still think they need to be more open. But let's look at how Facebook has performed these past few quarters. Actually, they've performed very well. And I think the problem with that is that what Facebook is seeing is that even though they have actually taken on a good amount of censorship, it has not hurt their business. Unlike Twitter. Twitter, granted, was much more aggressive in censorship, still is, but they are not a monopoly. And I've said this before on the show. Twitter's not a monopoly, despite how dominant Twitter is in, short form kind of like content, social networking, right? These tweets, it's still not a monopoly. They don't have anywhere near the power with advertisers and their users. They're not a platform conglomerate. They don't have multiple content types. I think actually through their leadership's fault that they haven't been able to embrace new content formats and platform business models. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But they don't have that monopoly power that a Facebook has, that a Google has. And that's the real thing to look at here is you're actually seeing the process work. You're actually seeing the system work. When you have a dominant platform like Twitter, which abuses the core value and the core thesis for what platforms stand for, open, connecting people, sharing information, right? Collaboration, all these wonderful things. And you have a platform that actually goes against the grain on that, Twitter. Does it get hurt? The answer is yes. And we've now seen that with Twitter. I think we're going to see that with Expensify. So the system works, right? There is still a consequence for actions that are taken by the business that can materially impact that business's viability. When you get to monopoly status, that's where these things start to change, where the monopoly takes action that the community and the users may not like. But the monopoly is so strong and so sticky and so ingrained that it doesn't make a financial impact on the monopoly. The monopoly can still do and take action and take advantage of suppliers. That's how platforms take advantage when they get to monopoly status. They take advantage of suppliers, in this case, content creators. And we're actually seeing that in Facebook's case. They're actually thriving. And that's actually the scary lesson in all of this, right? Facebook can do just about anything that it wants, and it won't negatively impact them. That is then when the role of regulation is needed to promote innovation and competition and protect people's individual freedoms. So let's look at Facebook. This is earnings per share, first number, and then revenue. You've got them beating in Q2 and beating in Q3. Compare that to Twitter. Twitter, Q2, big misses on both earnings and revenue. They beat on earnings and revenue in Q3, but you have the slow user growth, basically flat user growth in the United States, right? That's the big problem for Twitter. So it's not impenetrable. It doesn't have that monopoly power. Facebook does. Facebook crushed Q3, showing 12% year-over-year growth in their DAUs, 1.82 billion on average for September through September or for September 2020. You know, their stock bumped up 4 or 5% on their Q3 earnings release. Facebook is doing just strong. I mean, when you look at, for example, Q2 is when Facebook was, right? Boycott Facebook. That was the whole thing. Boycott Facebook, where the media wanted Facebook to be more restrictive and censor more. And they actually didn't. And then everyone was saying, boycott Facebook. Let's look at their numbers. Okay. Q1 Facebook revenue, 2020, $17.7 billion. Q2, 18.6. Nice growth. They beat on revenue growth, right? Meanwhile, you saw Twitter miss. So, and now in Q3, where Twitter is missing on user growth, Facebook is strong on user growth. And when you think about what that user growth means, right? You've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got WhatsApp, you've got Facebook Messenger, you've got platform conglomerate status. And so the business, you know, maybe in certain areas, if they're seeing fall off, right? They just have so many tools in the toolbox to, to appear successful to Wall Street. And that's that monopoly power. And so this is really where you need the role of regulation to help protect producers and suppliers when the platform now is emboldened, right? If I'm in Facebook, and especially Google, because the DOJ doesn't know what they're doing with antitrust lawsuits. But if I'm in these two tech monopolies, I'm emboldened by this because you actually were able to be very aggressive and actually annoy a lot of your users. And the business is doing just fine. If anything, the business is doing great. If anything, the stock has never been better. That's the scary stuff, right? That's the real takeaway here. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.